Balake. Where is Balake at?
My name's Blake.
Do you want to go to war, Balake? I'm for real. Ron.
Aaron's right here, everyone. Welcome back for more SPTV, where every day's a great day not to be in a cult. The mystery has been solved. The case of the missing wife of Scientology's leader, David Miscavige. The wife's name is Shelly Miscavage. The mystery's been solved. Whitney Cummings solved it yesterday on her podcast, folks. Guys, I have never seen a celebrity discuss the issue of Shelly Miscavige being missing in the way that Whitney Cummings did yesterday. And thank you, Natalie Webster, for highlighting this on your recap this morning, because I had not heard of this at all. And then I watched the whole segment from Whitney Cummings' podcast yesterday, and it's even better than the small clip that Natalie shared. So at first I was just going to turn it into a little YouTube short. And then I saw that she actually discussed this a little bit at length. And I was like, this has got to be its whole own video. So this is awesome. By the way, one of my favorite things is when my comedy world and my Scientology worlds collide. Whitney's in the comedy verse surrounding Tony Hinchcliffe, one of my hands down favorite comedians. Tony's weekly live podcast called Kill Tony is the world's biggest live podcast. Every Monday evening, he does a live open mic stand-up comedy podcast. I mean, I just tuned this past Monday when I tuned in. There was 50,000 people watching live. And that was just at the beginning of the show. Whitney Cummings is obviously a very well-known comedian in her own right, but you know, she's in that comedy universe that Tony Hinchcliffe is a big part of. So one of my favorite things to do is just to watch hours and hours and hours of stand-up comedy. And so anyway, Whitney's in that universe, and that's why if I seem unusually excited to do this video, it's because my two favorite worlds colliding, everyone. Okay, so let's see here. Well, let me just at least promote the podcast I'm about to play you guys a clip from. Whitney Cummings. Most of you guys who know anything about comedy already know who Whitney is. And let's see what she has to say here. Now, the intro is she's about, some of what they discuss, not entirely advertiser friendly at an early point in the video. So I'm gonna enter this conversation right after she just finished a sentence where she is trying to explain why she doesn't use a particular type of natural grown medication that many of her friends do and have encouraged her to do. She's talking about how she tried it and it made her feel a certain way that she didn't actually like. And that's where we're going to enter this conversation. Let's take a look at this. Make sure the volume's good. Here we go.
Everyone's like, it'll calm you down. It'll chill you out. When I tell you it made me twice as manic, I started investigating whether the Disney castles were made of dicks and looking up the animators. And I was looking for Shelly Miscavige.
Where is she? Where is she?
Here's what I'll say.
Yeah, please.
I think the bitch is at like Neiman Marcus in Houston. Like she is not, I don't think she's at the bottom of the ocean.
Right.
She's, I don't know. Epstein Island still has the mosque. She's probably in there having a lovely time. I don't think she's like a good person just because she's a woman. I think she's the Serena Joy of Gilead.
Got it.
You know what I'm saying? I think she kind of has probably been the marionette doll operator. It's a very hot take of this whole thing.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Do you think? I mean,
what? Why did she disappear again? Where was the last time she was?
Because every man in Scientology is gay and she was a woman. And they had no use for her.
Yes.
They pushed her off the boat.
Okay. And you think she is in Neiman Marcus?
I'm just saying, like, I just think we're like looking at her. And look, this is comedian brain. This is devil's advocate. This is why I will always be alone. And there's rings on every finger except this one. I get it. But this whole thing of that she's this like victim that's been hidden. I mean, she was with the head of Scientology for what, 30 years? Right?
Apparently still.
Don't you think she was the mastermind behind it all? Not to say a man couldn't build an organization this complex without a woman's brain behind, but it's like Hitler had Leni Riefenstahl. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, great point. Serena Joy is in the
If I want to win an argument, I will just bring up Hitler.
Yeah. I mean, shuts everything down. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, Hitler.
He wasn't great.
Once Hitler's brought up, there's nowhere to go from there.
All right. Well, I have a strict rule. You can't say Hitler more than 3 times in a sentence this early in a video. So anyway, the thing is, Whitney has actually nailed it. And it's not like she's talking about something that, you know, many people in the former Scientology world haven't mentioned before. It's just that usually when Shelly's mentioned on a very, very high profile public platform, it's the troll aspect of that she's missing. And guys, I do it all the time. I do it all the time. I've explained why I do it. I'm going to explain again in this video why I do it. But I've actually never seen an example of someone doing it on a very major public platform, giving the other side of the argument. That's like, yeah, she's missing, but she's not really missing. And yeah, it's a shame that she, you know, is being treated a certain way by her husband, but she's not like exactly a victim now, because that is perfectly true. Okay, so some thoughts on Shelly Miscavige. Oh, and by the way, one of the funniest things about this is that, well, Shelly's niece, Jenna Miscavige, you guys all know her. You guys all love her. After Natalie's recap, Jenna called me and said, "Did you see what Whitney Cummings said on her podcast?" And I'm like, yeah, I'm about to do a video about it. And Jenna completely agrees with everything that Whitney has said. And by the way, I think out of all the comedians in the, I want to call it the Tonyverse, the Tony Hinchcliffe verse, it's not fair to just characterize Whitney as someone in Tony's universe. Whitney's the center of her own universe. But out of all the comedians in the podcast space, I feel like Whitney is probably one of the ones most likely to want to dedicate like an entire episode of her podcast to talking about the Shelly Miscavige and Scientology subject. So Whitney, if you'd be interested in doing a whole show with Jenna Miscavige, which I think you'd find terribly interesting. I don't know if Jenna gives out her email address, but if anyone, and of course, Whitney's not watching this podcast, but if anyone in the Whitneyverse wants to suggest that Whitney do a chat with Jenna Miscavige about her Uncle Dave and her Aunt Shelly, feel free to give out my email address, growingupinscientology@gmail.com, and happy to forward anything on to Jenna. So here's the thing about Shelly. When I do content and stuff, a lot of what I like to do is, or sometimes, is consider what someone who's still in Scientology might think if they're watching the content. And the thing is, if you're a Scientologist and you're hearing about the Shelly Miscavige being missing issue, as a Scientologist wouldn't really be concerned about the missing aspect, because first of all, missing is a word that's being misused in the case of Shelly Miscavige. Everyone who has done shows and videos saying that Shelly's missing, usually as a part of that show or that video, shows you exactly where they believe Shelly is living and working. Well, if you believe that she's living and working there, then she's not actually missing, is she? Usually when someone's missing, it's you have no idea where they are and do not know where they are living and working. In the case of Shelly Miscavige, if you're a Scientologist and you're hearing that she's gone missing and you're like, what does that mean? Well, it means David Miscavige removed her from her post. Well, why? And it means he reassigned her to another more secret confidential base. And you go, why? And it means that they're not together anymore. And you go, why? To a Scientologist, Scientology is supposed to have the tools to handle every problem you could ever encounter in life. Scientology is like to be the magic elixir that once you drink it, you just magically wake up from the matrix and all of life's problems just fall away because they're all fake. And Scientology reveals the truth of everything to you, and you become the master of your own domain. Not in that way, but master of your own domain, master of your destiny. You become this superhuman, godlike creature who can just solve any problems just by thinking about them. You can resolve a problem on the other side of the world just by thinking about it. And you go, and David Miscavige couldn't fix his own marriage? David Miscavige couldn't even use Scientology to resolve whatever problems his own wife was having on her post? And you go, and here's the thing, David Miscavige's wife, Shelly, her job in the Sea Organization was to be his assistant. That was her job. When you hear people saying Shelly was a very senior executive, it's true. She was a senior executive because she was his assistant. Now, some people who have characterized her as like the number 2 in command of Scientology. There's a difference between being David Miscavige's deputy and being his assistant. It's like the difference between being the assistant regional manager and being the assistant to the regional manager. Shelly Miscavige was the assistant to David Miscavige. This is why people who would have interactions with Miscavige and his entourage, like, for example, Leah Remini, when she was a celebrity and would go to Scientology events, she would interact with David Miscavige and his entourage. This is how Leah Remini became familiar with Shelly Miscavige. But I, as a good little Scientology staff member and Sea Org soldier, have never spoke to Shelly Miscavige. I only saw her once in my life. Even when I saw her, she was not introduced to me. I did not actually know who she was. I would not be able to pick her out of a lineup. And someone would have to actually say to me, that is Shelly Miscavige, David Miscavige's assistant. She's never appeared in any publications with her name underneath it. She's never someone who ever spoke on a stage to Scientologists at an event. Her job was to be David Miscavige's assistant. Once, and I've also said in my previous videos, in the Sea organization, being married to someone and being someone's spouse means nothing. It's not like if you're the president of the United States and you're going to events, even overseas, your wife as the first lady would always be with you. In David Miscavige's case, the only reason Shelly ever traveled with him anywhere or was ever seen with him anywhere at all is not because they were married. It's because she was his assistant. Once he got pissed off with her for the last time and removed her from her post and reposted her to another base, in Scientology terms, there's no reason in the world anyone in Scientology would ever see her ever again. And the same holds true for all other Sea organization members who work at the International Management Base or who work at these super secret, confidential, remote CST bases, the Church of Spiritual Technology bases. Those are the bases where Scientology has dug these massive underground tunnels or tunnels under mountains. These, what do they call them? The CST, oh God, why is the word just escape? Vaults, these underground vaults that get built into the sides of mountains to store L. Ron Hubbard's written and recorded works on steel plates and titanium boxes with argon gas to survive a nuclear holocaust. Guys, not even Scientologists aren't even supposed to know the locations of these bases. Senior Sea Org officials aren't even supposed to know the locations of these bases. Sea Org members who work at Scientology's secretive international management base aren't even supposed to know the locations of these bases. And that's why we don't see Shelly Miscavige. That's why we don't see Shelly Miscavige. And again, you guys, sometimes I like to repeat myself in my videos. So I'm just going to circle back and say, and that's why the reason I talk about Shelly Miscavige, other than the fact that Shelly Miscavige videos always do very well on YouTube, that's the same reason tabloids talk about Shelly. It's the same reason, certain websites talk about Shelly. They do great. They get great numbers. But if you're a Scientologist and you hear about the Shelly Miscavige story, what you're going to take away from that is Scientology didn't work for Shelly Miscavige. Scientology didn't work for David Miscavige. David Miscavige couldn't apply the correct technology to fix whatever difficulties Shelly was having on her post. Or, God forbid, David Miscavige couldn't apply the right piece of Scientology technology to resolve whatever issues, personal issues he was having with his wife that caused him to not want to work with her anymore. And for those even more familiar with the situation, they might read into it a little deeper and go, wait a second. So they had something that seemed to be working well for, and guys, I can't claim to know exactly how many years Shelly was successfully on post as his assistant. I know it started as early as 1990, possibly earlier. And I know that I think, and at the risk of being wrong, please feel free to fact check me on this. It was sometime around 2005. It was sometime before Tom Cruise's wedding. And I think Tom Cruise got married in 2006, you guys. It was sometime in 2005 that she got removed. So they were working together side by side, 24 hours a day, working together professionally, being together personally, 24 hours a day for 15 years. And then something went wrong that David Miscavige couldn't fix. If I were a Scientologist and I allowed myself to ponder this for a while, it would actually be one of these little seeds that gets planted that later on you keep going back to it and you keep going back to it and you go, wait a second. We as Scientologists are always told that any non-optimum situation in our lives that we are not able to handle completely, it's because we are not applying the correct piece of Scientology technology, or we are not applying it correctly, or we have our own out ethics or misunderstood words or evil purposes or blind spots or other intentionness or other fish to fry, all sorts of things we are told, shortcomings in ourselves, made to feel guilty, that we are not absolutely thriving and succeeding on all dynamics. And David Miscavige couldn't fix his marriage? David Miscavige couldn't fix his wife? That doesn't make any sense. That is why I continue to talk about Shelly Miscavige. There's another kind of weird truth here, which is that Shelly Miscavige has been quote unquote missing for so long now. On top of the fact that almost nobody outside of the international management base would have ever been able to tell you who David Miscavige was married to, or even pick Shelly Miscavige out of a lineup, even before she quote unquote went missing. And now that she's also been gone for this many years, almost nobody in Scientology has ever heard of Shelly Miscavige. Most people probably think she's just a fake person that we have made up to, because we're all on Big Pharma's payroll and are just out to destroy Scientology with vicious lies. Most Scientologists probably think Shelly Miscavige isn't even a real person, and that it's just someone we've made up because no one could ever prove that she exists or doesn't exist. Yeah, I'm not kidding you guys. Most Scientologists probably don't even believe Shelly Miscavige is real. They've never seen her. They've never heard of her. And the Sea Org members who do interact with David Miscavige, Shelly's been gone for so long that even those Sea Org members don't know. Even Sea Org members who interact with David Miscavige and his entourage, Shelly's been missing from that entourage for 19 years. Most Sea Org members these days are either 85 years old or 25 years old. So most Sea Org members never even heard of Shelly Miscavige, never even seen her. But on the off chance that there's Scientologists out there willing to go on the internet and start, thinking outside of the bubble and start digging for things, I think it's important to understand David Miscavige couldn't even use Scientology to make his own marriage work. And guys, we talk about Scientology just destroying families. There is hardly a family that's in Scientology that has not in some way, shape, or form been destroyed by the destructive policies and beliefs of Scientology. And it's kind of interesting to continue to highlight that even applies to David Miscavige's family, the leader of Scientology. It applies doubly or triply to L. Ron Hubbard, the founder of Scientology. His entire family was destroyed. And I'm talking about his family that was in Scientology. L. Ron Hubbard's own family, the ones he got in, the ones he birthed into Scientology, the kids who grew up in Scientology, completely and utterly destroyed. Tom Cruise's family, completely and utterly destroyed. Almost every family that's had anything to do with Scientology, destroyed to some degree by its involvement in Scientology. I mean, you talk about David Miscavige. Forget not being able to fix things with his wife. David Miscavige's own father, Ronnie Miscavige Sr., the one who got David and his brother and his sisters into Scientology. Ronnie Sr. left Scientology. David Miscavige's brother, Ronnie Jr., left Scientology. David Miscavige's niece, Jenna Miscavige, has left Scientology. David Miscavige's sister, who's still in Scientology, got arrested and busted for drug charges. Guys, to a Scientologist, going, David Miscavige, the leader of the whole group, his identical twin sister was arrested and busted on drug charges? That's insane. That's why I like talking about Shelly Miscavige, to highlight the family destruction and to highlight the fact that Scientology doesn't even, quote unquote, work for the people at the very, very top. Okay, let's see. I had a few bullet points here that I wanted to make sure I didn't miss. Nah, seems like we pretty much covered it all. Let me check out some of the comments here. The lovely Barbara, SPTV Tattoo Warrior, is in the back helping me out. Snotface says, Tony, This is Tony Hinchcliffe, Shane Gill, Ari Shafir, Mark Normand. They are all great. Yep. Love them all. Can't get enough of them. Bombay Mike. Whitney tried to join Scientology when first moving to Los Angeles. They wouldn't take her because she has too many questions. LOL. I would also guess because she's been on too many medications, the type of which would disqualify you from doing Scientology. But I've actually never heard Whitney tell that story. I would love to hear that. What is happening? I'm looking at some of these comments here, but I don't know what they mean. Yeah, I don't know what that means, so I'm not going to bring it up. Sorry, guys. Okay, Better Together. Have you seen Wild Wild Country? It was the cult leader's assistant who broke the federal laws and poisoned everyone and defrauded the voting systems. The assistant was the badass. I did see that documentary, and it was absolutely amazing. I'm glad that you mentioned this point here because I sort of forgot to comment on that aspect of it. Shelly Miscavige is a bit of a controversial figure among former Scientologists because a lot of people who worked with David Miscavige and Shelly, of which I'm not one of those people, have very, very unkind thoughts and experiences and negative things to say about Shelly because she wasn't just some angel. She rose to the top for a reason. Was she at least a kinder, gentler version of David Miscavige? Sure, but that's not saying very much, you guys. That's not saying very much. Okay, Lisa Raphael. I helped Whitney after the Malibu fires transport donations for displaced animals. I have her cell number and I will text her. I hope she responds. That is absolutely amazing. You know, if you're going to text her, make sure to focus on the Jenna Miscavige aspect of it and not the me aspect of it. She's not going to have any idea who I am, and there's no reason for her to talk to me. But say, hey, would you like to chat with Jenna Miscavige about her missing aunt, Shelly? That would be absolutely amazing. Okay, Better Together, Wild Wild Country, the Netflix documentary on a cult that actually finished the takeover of a town like the one Scientology is waging in Clearwater. The town has been cult-free for decades, but never recovered. You know, one thought that I had when I watched that Wild Wild Country documentary is that David Miscavige could only hope that Scientology would ever have the kind of influence in a town that cult, was it the Rajneeshians? The Rajneeshians got to a point of having such control of a town. I mean, negative control, mind you. But Scientology, you know, there's an idea that Scientology has a certain amount of control in Clearwater. And I've done a lot of videos explaining the ways in which that's true and also the ways in which it's not true. But believe me, David Miscavige only wishes that Scientology could have as much control in Clearwater as the Rajneeshians had of that town up in Oregon. Anna says, can we mention the central role that Shelly Miscavige played in the abuse that Serge Del Mar suffered? And not only him. Exactly to what your point. Jeffrey Augustine is in the chat. Shelly is missing. Blame it on Aaron. I love it. Form 13909. Shelly reverse engineering Bob Lazar tech with whole track recall. Church of Spiritual Technology plates are a sure story. Okay, I like it. I'm listening. Parker Osman, very funny. Shelly is like a unicorn. She's mythical. Jeff Hawkins. Jeff, I haven't seen you in a while, man. Good to see you in here. Thank you for joining. Shelly's real job was to follow David Miscavige around and clean up his messes. After he would bull in a china shop through an area, Shelly would come through and clean up all the broken china. Yes, indeed. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, Jeff, you might have some stories about that in your book called Counterfeit Dreams. If you guys aren't familiar with Jeff and haven't read his book, I highly recommend it. It's one of the earliest books that I read of former Scientologists. It was awesome. All right, guys, I have, Snotface, protect our parks, SPTV style. I only wish the SPTV community could get away with letting it all hang out on YouTube the way they do in their Protect Our Parks chats. I just feel like I don't even know how Joe keeps his videos monetized. I swear to God, sometimes I watch those things and I go, I don't get it. The kind of stuff they say, the kind of stuff they joke about, the stories that they tell, I don't even know how they do it. And I swear to God, Joe's new deal with Spotify, I know that deal depends on, he has to keep his videos on YouTube monetized. So anyway, I don't know how he does it. I wish I felt we could get away with being that relaxed on SPTV. Maybe one day we will get there. Who knows? All right, guys, I have an appointment I have to jump for. Thank you for hanging out with me, and I will talk to you soon.
Okay, if you want to see my rock and roll songs, click right on this guitar. And if you want to see a different one of my videos, oh, dancing for my love, then you could click right inside here. If you have subscribed or not, subscribe